So first number 5 is Stop.
Okay, Hunter, if you just want to like start over,
We start over?
we can start over.
Alright, well,
Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll have to floor talk about some technical difficulties. We have got them squared away, and we are now ready to begin the work session of the Bristol Town Council. I will start off agenda item number 1, and that is a capital date.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and Council. Like you said, just a nice little update. I know I say little, but it has been a heck of a season for capital projects. Right now, currently on the docket, we're working through or have worked through 28 capital projects, so no small feat for our nice quaint village that we have here in Frisco, but you know, we're getting them checked off the list, and I think everything's looking pretty spiffy around here. So as you know, the capital projects come from several different funds. We have capital fund, water fund, housing, arena as well, and there's some lodging tax stuff, but I didn't need to break that further down. So the first one, you know, to start breaking down the list, you know, our GAP project with what we were left with the medians and roundabouts, that project has officially started. Our contractors, Columbine Hills Construction. As you can see, you know, we have our conceptual picture here on the right, which will be one of the roundabouts at Water Dance. And to the left is the approach to that roundabout. And we actually have our verticality coming out with our raised mountain features, our colored concrete. So Columbine is moving at breakneck speed, I would say. You know, working with CDOT, one thing they requested was, hey, since we kind of ruined a lot of people's weekends, so to speak, with how big the traffic impacts were. As you can tell, as you drive through, it's shorter traffic control and stuff like that. So that's certainly helped Columbine light a fire. And, you know, they'll keep banging out these median piece sections and then really focus on the roundabouts since they'll need a ton of real estate there. So that project is running smooth and fast. With walkability improvements, you know, our essentially dead end pathway that we have right there, Recreation Way. You know, we had our concept there on the right hand side of the screen, and thankfully now we have Chris McGinnis, our town engineer, and doing the layout. It looks much better than the sketch over there on the right. And on the left, you can see this work is being done in-house by the streets division, and I helped them set grade and do a bunch of stuff the other day. They are killing it out there, so to speak, and you know, they should have a couple tweaks to dial in with that. And then a phone call just had to be made to get it capped with some asphalt. So that is moving along extremely well. And then I'm sure there will be more to come, but on the other side of the path, you know, for connectivity pieces, their town staff did have some discussions with the county last week or the week before, just to kind of further what is going on with their side as well. Just how their side connects with several different pieces of, you know, either trails or bike path and stuff like that. So, you know, there's definitely more to come on walkability improvements as things progress.
Did the county have a plan for over there? Like,
It's so preliminary right now that I would not want to say anything more than they've got a concept, and I'm sure Chris and myself and, you know, other staff will probably be back in front of you at some point before the end of the year, I would guess, with what they have proposed. So Old Town Hall remodel and expansion, it was not that long ago that I sat in front of council and, you know, we just opted, hey, let's run this through the budget process and see where we land. You know, we're still ironing things out with the capital budget, so there's been no official decision made on whether we can move forward with, you know, what I presented of the complete remodel and expansion, or we would have to dial it down. So we haven't reached that yet, but I would venture to guess when we start having those budget meetings, especially as it relates to the capital budget, that have a final decision piece that we can present to all of you. So the neighborhood park improvements, this, one aspect is directly behind the visitor information center, Old Town Hall. And so Old Town Hall Park, that, that whole piece would be taken care of at once. During construction, we got some concepts from Norris Design. We're gonna go through with staff and, do some economically sustainable VE on that. And, just get that dialed in. And then we did have some work that was going to be done at Walter Byron Park as well. But again, we need to do some VE and stuff like that because we do have a grant that is for a viewing deck. And obviously we want to make sure our grant dollars are being stretched as far as possible. So, taking that concept that we received and dialing back the design a little bit, we can get the design intent and not have to, spend so much capital on getting.
Yeah, you corrected yourself and I heard Old Town Hall, is there Old Town Hall? Is that a conscious change in the name? Because it is the visitor center, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's just a historical piece. And as part of the design team, we really embraced that, but like there's so much history with that facility that, it is Old Town Hall. Yes, its purpose at this point in time is as a visitor information center, but historically it was a town hall and it was a gathering space. So
Old Town Hall housing visitors.
exactly.
It's like smile like baby.
Yeah. The archivist formerly known as.
David, you're right.
Sounds like a grant.
So Triangle Park.
Looks great.
Chris Johnson and his team did a bang up job doing a ton of in-house work, making it more presentable than what CDOT left us with. And they completed the GAP project. There's more to come on that. I know community development is developing a plan. So I'm sure you'll get an update from Katie or a member of her staff about that's going to move forward. The Frisco Bay Marina landscaping / site work. This has reached substantial completion at this point. Again, Columbine Hills was our contractor. I think this project I am particularly passionate about because it seemed like the second we dropped the fence for the turf, people just flocked to it, as well as the geese. So, just one of the hurdles that you get to when you have a big turf expanse, but that project really closed out a big piece of the marina and just made it so much more of an inviting space and just activated so much wasted space. So yeah, it's been successful. Just working through some, turf issues and stuff here and there, nothing that's out of the ordinary with a landscaping project of this scope, which is why it's just substantial completion, not fully completed yet.
It looks awesome, and having that done, it feels like it just connects all of it. It all feels like one area now.
Yeah,
It's really great.
no, it's fantastic. Thank you so much. Slopeside Hall project is moving along beautifully at this point. The pictures that you have in front of you on the left will be the new stage and trellis area. Be a great space to activate for weddings, town events, anything like that, event space, because on the right side, which would be the north of that, you have the entire plaza. With how much bigger the plaza is getting, it's just going to be an immense space that will have to be activated in a good way. The picture in the middle, you know, that is now changed because they completed the backfill for the foundation. And they're starting to do underground plumbing work, which is fantastic. And then on the right side is actually going to be where the front door is. So, you know, when you see the views that are going to be outside of the offices, and our staff can just keep, you know, a nice watchful eye on the tubing hill and kind of all aspects of the operation. It's something that I know they're really excited about, and I think we all can be very excited about, because this will be such a awesome facility once it gets open and fulfill, you know, a good thing for the community and visitors alike. And we have AD Miller working on this, and we're probably gonna start framing here, I want to say towards the end of the month, and we do have a local thing. So hands on throwing 2 crews at it, which get as much as we can done. Everybody's favorite, the town hall dumpster enclosure. We received some plans, and you know, we're just working with the designer on that, going back and forth, doing speedy and stuff like that, just to you know, ensure that we remain in budget. This is also a project where we have grant money behind it, so we just want to ensure that we get this wrapped up before the end of the year, and it will. So
That's on the record.
I know what you do.
They say,
I thought about it. For our environmental and sustainability projects, I would say the capstone project for that would be Public Works Solar. And here is a picture of the route at Public Works. The only thing that we are waiting on at this point in time, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, is just Xcel Energy needs to come and release the meters, and then they flip the switches, and now we can start putting power back into the grid and lessen our footprint of energy usage. So that's what we're waiting on there. You know, something that's kind of boilerplate, what we're doing here on out is always analyzing feasibility spots for more car charging stations and stuff like that. So that's always on the docket moving forward, and we will absolutely seize the opportunity of doing that when we can. Our fiber infrastructure, originally, this project as a whole encompassed the connection between the Nordic Center and the maintenance facility, and then Frisco Landing to the Lund House. Due to, you know, the scope increase at the marina, working with Joe from IT, you know, there was a great audible on that one, and being able to connect the facilities through a Wi-Fi gateway. So there's point-to-point Wi-Fi there, which is certainly helping out their operation. It's making things go a lot smoother, and chatting with Logan and some of the staff there, that's been successful. And then now officially, I think they're just waiting on some connection pieces for the project between the Nordic Center and maintenance facility. But the maintenance facility will now actually be wired in, and you know, Sarah and her awesome staff and Sid can actually not have to wait just for emails and stuff like that. They can be plugged into the system, so to speak.
That include a public network to both locations?
Not at this time, I think, and I don't even want to say yes or no on that. I think that's probably in the grand plan eventually, you know, to have some public Wi-Fi out there, but I think with that, again, I'd have to check with Joe, you know, someone vastly more knowledgeable about our comms, you know, what does our system, what kind of backbone do we need in place to be able to start offering that to visitors in the community.
Yeah. More for the folks that run events out there, like they would like to run their scoring, if you will, or timing all on a
Gotcha.
network somewhere.
Gotcha. So Complete Streets, I am not gonna talk too much about this because, Emily and her and the design team are gonna be talking about it, but, it's been fun walking through some of the history with the design team and stuff like that, and, it's tracking very nicely, and I will leave it at that for you. So the town hall master plan process, that has been going extremely well. We've been working very closely with Wember, one of our owners reps. And I really wanted to put our vision and our mission up because that is what we came up with, as a team for this master plan. We checked off this step, creating a mission statement and a vision statement. And then we just finished up interviewing all the heads of the departments, who would be in this facility, knowing and understanding what their needs are and what their predictability in the future is like, staffing, equipment, spatial needs, and we're also working with Mount Stace and Stace Architects. So right now he is taking care of a spatial analysis on that. So we're slowly ticking away the boxes on that. But the benefit of working with a group like Wember is they've done these master plans through and through. Stace and his team have done them as well. So we're definitely in good hands moving forward with this. And hopefully in the coming years, we'll start incorporating some of these changes into the capital plan. So our storm system repair, this photo is just showing just a minor subset of what our storm system looks like in the core of town. At this point in time, what we're just doing is, the way we can keep our infrastructure working is just being really on top of the maintenance of it. And Landon and the streets division, they actually just wrapped up cleaning out the storm system the other day and cleaning out all the vaults and all that. So that's one big component to making your asset last. And eventually, we really want to do a thorough assessment of this system, start really diving into putting numbers on paper of what it's going to cost to repair some sections that are in need. Technology purchases. Speaking of technology, technology purchases, the great thing with Joe being very proactive and working with the town for so long is, he has a replacement schedule for all of our IT components, just like Mike Nation does with Fleet. So it's on the same type of schedule that they're on. Each department every couple of years gets their stuff switched out. Always staying on top of when new employees come in, getting what software they need and everything to help them be successful in their positions. Public Works fuel system, this project is closed out. So this is all done. On the left, this was our tiny little below ground storage tank system. And on the right, we have our more, when I say this, you have our more environmentally friendly fuel system on the right side with, the road containment, stuff like that. It's working beautifully. Pumps work really fast, so that is very nice since the older pumps. Our vehicle and equipment purchases, those have been completed for the year. Mike jumped on that as quick as he could. Frank, you can just see his boots under the lift there, but you know, he's upfitting, you know, one of the new F-250s there that we got. Then we were able to procure one F-150 Lightning. So that's not ours. That's just, you know, what we'll be receiving. No estimated time of when we'll be receiving that. I know all the manufacturers at this point in time are trying to make a huge pivot to the demand of that market. So hopefully we get it soon.
Obviously, the taxes, we get the benefit of like federal rebates on EVs.
I think that would be a Hillary question, but the last time I heard, we don't seem to get those same type of tax incentives and stuff that others would. That's my understanding, but again,
There might be some Excel rebates that we're eligible for.
We get some now.
you know, and I think a good example of that is, you know, the electrification infrastructure, you know, that Jeff is working with Excel on at this point in time. To just get that really critical piece to making all that EV components work. So, you know, that's a great program from Excel, like, hey, we'll put pretty much all the bill for this, you know, for getting that infrastructure in there. So I think that's the good trade-off on that kind of stuff. Our street management plan, Jerome, you know, he is on guard 24/7. But all of our capital projects relating our street inventory were completed. We got our slurry seals taken care of. The biggest one, as you saw, was over there on Granite Street. And then they're still finishing up some stuff on the Dam Road right now. I know that was a real fun one with traffic control on Highway 9, and then they're basically saying, don't use the Dam Road. So that got to be fun for a couple of days there. But the street management plan, you know, we have our asset plan for streets that's being followed. Landon's doing a great job of that and getting people on the hook early in the year, just to get some solid pricing. Our building management plan, kind of like the same thing as our streets plan. You know, we want to reinvest in our facilities and do so in a smart manner. Adam's been doing a great job at this. You know, and something that we're probably going to shift to where there used to be a ton of capital projects related to changing out carpets and this, that, and the other thing. Well, you'll hear from us more about it, but we're shifting a lot of that more towards like, that's just your standard maintenance for the facility and stuff like that. So, you know, we're just revamping the process a little bit. So our Highway 9 sidewalk improvements. I'm very excited about this one. And I'll just go through it a little quick, but Chris McGinnis, our town engineer, he is going to be spearheading this, and he is already working with CDOT because the town was actually awarded, we did not receive the TAP funding that we applied for, but we did receive MMOF, the multimodal grant. You know, a member of the Intermountain Transportation, they had to return funds because they couldn't spend them in the allotted amount of time. So we thought we were closed out. The TPR voted to release those funds to the next two in line. Luckily, you know, we were one of the ones, so we received $500,000 for this. And it, you know, we combined the Walmart path, which some of you have heard for a while, with the improvement that we wanted to make between School Road and Han Drive. Essentially, the first entrance or exit, right exit out of the vet clinic. We want to make improvements there, just to improve maintenance, pedestrian safety, and all that type of stuff. So Chris is working with that. You should be hearing from Chris soon about a IGA with CDOT to keep the ball rolling on this. And the goal is to get working on this spring, summer 2024.
And that's all in the CDOT right away, is that correct?
Yes.
We did not get the other. Easement deal for the other property.
Yeah, and we're keeping it all on CDOT right away. The one easement that we did receive, Jeff, I know was went through fire and brimstone to get an easement from Walmart on that corner of On and Highway.
It did go through, finally goes through, wow.
Yeah, fire and brimstones.
Yeah.
In our water fund. PFAS mitigation, that's a big one that we have right now. Water department did receive a $50,000 grant for pilot testing. That pilot testing has been completed, and now Jeff, Ryan, and the water engineers are working with the engineers so they can design the adequate system for PFAS mitigation. So that there's more to come on that. And there's a lot of, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of potential grant funding around upfitting your system to that PFAS mitigation.
And we've already done all the paperwork to be first in line for that.
And that's specific to well 7 currently, but what I'm hearing you guys say, there's an option to go system wide.
We're not gonna need to go system wide.
That was me. Cool.
Water tank lining, again, reinvesting in our assets. This is just going to ensure that we can stretch the water tank usability for a while. The one critical piece of why this is getting pushed from 2023 is because CDOT will not allow the town to access the water tank off of I-70. So working with the Forest Service and the engineers to, get a road in there, which will just increase, that'll be a win-win for everybody. It's just going through, I think right now there's an environmental aspect being studied, making sure there's no impacts there. So once that is completed, then that'll be a big, that's kind of usually the overarching big box that needs to get checked for any improvements in an area like that. So once that gets wrapped up, I think they can hammer the gas on getting that designed. Because Excel also has an easement in there as well. So just working with those two things, but once that road is built, then we can, get a contractor in and get that taken care of. Water line replacement, that is still on schedule for this year. That is going to be over on Lagoon. And Ryan is working with the engineers and Liz Schmidt, our surveyor, to get all that, taking all the preliminary stuff before that gets thrown out to bid. But several contractors know that there's an issue over there, so people are just waiting for that package to come. One of the benefits of the small community, excavators talking to each other. So there's the housing fund. Granite Park, this is another very exciting project. We're in our partnership with CDOT. This thing is moving quickly. As you see, we got our underground plumbing in. The picture on the left, I helped them set a camera up, a time-lapse camera. So that's been cool. And once there's more stuff going on and it starts getting a little bit more exciting going vertical, we'll probably start sharing more of those photos on a weekly basis and stuff like that. But yeah, moving at breakneck speed. Matt Quigley, the site superintendent, is, he just really wants to get things closed in before the winter time. They do have a satellite site, which is what you've seen at the Third and Granite lot. There are a ton of prefabricated walls over there. Starting next week, we just had our owner architect meeting today. And they're gonna start doing base plates and stuff like that on the east building starting next week. So you're gonna start seeing some vertical movement on that next week and the following week after the slabs get poured. The Galena Street project, that's moving along well, working with. Excuse me, I'm drawing a blank on NHB, thank you very much on that. For what's feasible for a site of that size, and that's moving along well, and a lot more to come on that, a lot more.
It's public works it's our work.
We own the building.
No, I realize that, but we're not building it, we're not taking it through the plans. So I just kind of
It's not really
it's not really a capital project because we're not responsible for construction. Okay. Making sure
although it did get hit by lightning this week.
It
Knocked out the system.
maintenance of the gardens.
So going back to Bill on the animals. And again, in the housing fund, there's more building management for town housing units. Yes, we have a property manager, but the funds that pay for the property manager and any major repairs, obviously. Townwide turf restoration, Chris Johnson jumped on this real early. And there were a bunch of different spots around town that we're taking care of for this process, but Ballfield and Walter Byron were the two centerpieces for that project, and that is completed and wrapped up. For the Marina Fund, the boat ramp drainage improvements, that is at substantial completion. Wet well was installed, our pump is working, our drainage forebay and pond are working. Even in that crazy rainstorm that we got last week, it was pretty cool seeing that thing work. Because it filled up the pond and the pond did exactly what it was supposed to do, and voila, we have a dry boat ramp. So this picture here, all of that water that you see at the boat ramp is just residual. We are not seeing that ponding issue. So that has definitely been a fun project to be a part of and a big box to have checked in that area. More to come on that. We'll just have to have the contractor come back. The groundwater level has just been so high because everywhere in Colorado is really wet right now, which is great. I know my folks are loving the water on the Front Range, especially my dad's plants. But they're just not releasing that much water. So they're going to come back after the marina operations are over when they have a little bit more room to breathe. The electricians are going to get back in there, and No Bridge is going to help us with lateral pipes from the inlet over to the wetland. The equipment purchases have been taken care of for the marina for 2023. Same thing, they have a rental fleet that gets heavy use. Another rental equipment. As everybody who's been out there, they're rocking and jamming. So I know all that equipment's being put to good use at this point in time. So, but I don't have anything beyond this, I'll just talk to our points about our grant opportunities. So at this point in time, town staff, we've really been searching far and wide for grant opportunities. DOLA has a great amount of that. And, Hillary just submitted for an energy audit and assessments through DOLA. Public Works Solar Project that's going through DOLA. The Main Street light replacement to solar, the Main Street Live program, that was submitted through DOLA. And then I am working with Michael Baker right now, and we had a nice meeting with the Colorado Energy Office. So there's potential for both Slopeside Hall and Old Town Hall for public building electrification, for both the solar, the heating pumps, and all the electrical components that would go into that. So that's a great program, and the Colorado Energy Office is eager to partner with local agencies to get that money spent, because the quicker they can get people on board, quicker they can go back to the legislators in Denver and say, hey, the money left really quick, we need more of it. So those are kind of the big ones right now. We're definitely scouring far and wide. I know Chris McGinnis attended a webinars day for bridges, bridge type of grant funding and stuff like that. So I think everybody on staff is knowing that, hey, our budget isn't infinite, and let's dig deep and use a little elbow grease, and we can get something, because we have a lot of good projects that would be worthy of that grant. So overall, in a nutshell, that is what we got going on capital wise. If there's any questions or anything like that.
On grants, for a while, we had outside consultants advising and lobbying and all that stuff, and I think it was just reasonable through the transitions of time, because it went away. Is that on the table? I'm not asking you, you have it. Is that something that's worth revisiting? Is if we're being aggressive in seeking grants, should we be using outside consultants in addition to in-house?
The types of grants right now that we're seeking, I don't think so. If there was an opportunity to go after, if we had some programs that required federal grant type work, then perhaps. But we don't really have any projects right now that were actually, I mean, the example could be like the backyard and the future of that, but that really needs to come out of the Forest Service. Because they're successful, they're the ones that are going to get grant money to do that.
Just to know, we only know what we know.
Thanks for keeping track of all this. It's ambitious. We've asked a lot. Everybody, and thanks for keeping it all happening. And since we redid Main Street, we only did that. It seems like we did less or more go all over town. So
Yeah, it's very fun. It's very exciting. I think a lot of the projects are just immediately giving back to the community and activating spaces that we're not done before. So it's very exciting what we got going on.
I think you got whatever it was, 28 projects. There's only one that really was oops, we need to fix this problem. I'm sure none of them are going perfectly every day.
Oh,
But the fact that that many balls are in the air, and for the most part, that's just spectacular.
yeah, overall, every department, is contributing to all this, so that the team, as they say, really came to play this year. So it's makes my job, everybody around the project, makes everyone's life a lot easier when everybody wants to jump in, be a member of the team, lend a hand.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the update.
Thank you very much.
For all the teams keeping it all happening. Next up this afternoon is item number 2, and this is the Granite Street, Complete Streets 30% conceptual design plan. 18, someone.
Second.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry. No.
Thank you.
I haven't even asked you.
Yeah.
I was like this one.
Yeah. Works.
It's good. Is to accommodate the lottery ticket run.
I gave him a 5, so I keep giving me getting it done.
Walk down there too.
Yeah, I was waiting for the middle of the meeting where you could jump up and scream and walk out. Yeah, I see you jumped online, so if you need to say anything, please just chime in if I don't see you waving your hand or anything else.
I'll let you know. Yeah. The first of many, I'm sure.
That,
Okay. So today we are just have an update on the Granite Street 30% design progress. I have Janine White with me. She's from Tool Design Group. She's been the lead on the project, so she's here to answer any technical questions, but I'll give a little background on the project. All right, so before getting into how we developed the proposed design and what it looks like, I'll provide a little overview on how we got here today and why Granite Street was selected for improvements. Starting in 2019, the town adopted its community plan, which sets forth the overall policy for the town to grow and evolve in the coming decades. From that plan, the town determined that a downtown complete streets plan was a top priority in the community. So beginning in 2021 and adopted in 2022, the town developed the Frisco Downtown Complete Streets Plan. And that set out to determine how complete streets in downtown Frisco can serve the needs of all road users, regardless of travel mode, and how Frisco streets can be designed to be more inviting, active, and supportive of the town's economic and social life. With the Complete Streets Plan, Granite Street was selected as the priority corridor based on the challenges and barriers identified during community outreach. So with that, a stop optimization study was done with the goal of providing a quick build solution to the unorganized intersections along Granite Street. So as a result, and what you've seen this summer is that all-way stop signs were introduced at 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Avenue. And this is a temporary solution with the thought that there would be more permanent implementation in the future. And so that brings us to today. We have the Granite Street 30% preliminary design, and that aims to take what we learned and move forward with needed improvements. So during the design or during the Complete Streets development or the plan development, a design charrette was held and residents had the opportunity to provide comments on the biggest areas of concern on Granite Street specifically. And top responses included vehicle speeds, cut through traffic, inconsistent patterns of stop signs. All the things you see on the screen were high concerns and priorities for the community. And really just essentially an unorganized street with lack of safety. And so later in 2021, taking that feedback that was given, a concept ideal survey presented 3 preliminary options for what Granite Street could look like. And so these were high level conceptual images, but members of the community and council were able to provide comments on each options. And from that, option 2 was the preferred option based on the comments. And really what made option 2 stand out to the community was that it had separated bicycle and walking pathways, and that it wasn't just one big strip of asphalt. So there's natural elements to the plan, which was preferred and encouraged by the community. Again, just reiterating the positive support from the community for a design that includes a designated bike and walking path, physical separation from pedestrians and motor vehicle traffic, and then those consistent marked crossings and stop signs, and as well as connectivity for existing sidewalks and trails throughout the community. So this project aims to move Granite Street towards becoming a more complete street. What does that mean? That means implementing improvements that create safe, comfortable, and inviting conditions for all road users of all ages and all abilities. This involves developing a process and approach that is unique to Briscoe and unique to Granite Street. So when designing a complete street, there's no one size fits all. It's really specific to Granite Street and Briscoe. So a little update from this past summer, taking what was found with, well, I guess this past year, we had a full design group contracted at the beginning of 2023 to move forward with the preliminary 30% design plans. And they really took what was provided during the Complete Streets Plan update. So as part of the design process, we held 2 public meetings this past June. One was held for the Granite Street HOAs and one was held for the general public. At this meeting, we received quite a bit of feedback about the design, both positive and negative. And the list on the screen summarizes the top concerns that we heard. Some of these items have been worked through throughout the design process, and some will need to continue to be looked at while moving forward with the project. One example was landscaping. So the buffers on the proposed 30% design or the preliminary design showed trees. Not everyone liked the trees. But some people did, and that's absolutely not set in stone. That's something that we can keep working on as we move forward. And in some of the other examples we had, there were quite a few comments on why the bike lane was proposed on the south side of the street. And that is something that's been looked at throughout the design process. Part of that was the existing grades on the north side of the street, as well as the existing connectivity to other bike paths and lanes on the south side of the street. So taking a look at all of the comments that we got and incorporating them into the plan and re-looking at the design itself. One thing I'd like to note is that we have continued to work with some of the HOAs along Granite Street on particular parking challenges that those developments may have with this redesign. Everything is proposed within the town right of way, but that does cause a lot of shifting for quite a few residents. So continuing to work through, and again, as the design moves forward, we have the opportunity to incorporate and keep looking at these concerns and comments. And so with that, this is the proposed 30% design from Madison to Summit Boulevard. I'll go through kind of 2 block sections at a time and just kind of go through them quickly. I don't think we need to look at them, but we are here to answer any questions. And then I want to take a look at next steps now that we have at least a proposed 30% design. So this, you're looking at Madison to 2nd Avenue. We have 3 typical sections throughout the design. So this is a section 1, as you see, which shows a sidewalk on the north, angled parking on the north as well. And then the bike lane on the south side. And here is a cross section. I know it's a little blurry, but it's to show that their sidewalk is proposed to be 6 feet with 20-foot angled parking, 2 drive lanes, so 24 feet in total, a buffer, and the 10-foot bike lane.
So wait, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
But on the left side,
Yes,
you have a sidewalk, on the right side is
the bike,
bike path, which is also a sidewalk.
right, it'd be designated for, bike travel and have those markings, with,
We'll just go and make sure there is
But, yeah.
sidewalk on both sides.
right, yeah, there's 2 travel lanes. So this is looking at 2nd to 4th, so here you'll see the design shift from section 1 to section 3, which changes the location of the parking from the north side to the south side. The sidewalk and the bike path stay the same, and same with the widths of everything.
The trees that we're talking about are aspens, right? More than, like, they're not
Yeah,
super,
and that's just something right now, there's a placeholder for that, and we can continue to look at what makes sense, what will stick, what will grow. All those things still have
we're
to
not
really
really evergreen, right? There's people.
Right. Yeah, and that was a concern from the community as well, as blocking views from beautiful landscaping as well as safety concerns.
Yeah, okay.
Fourth Avenue to Sixth Avenue, here we switched to section 2. Street design of section 2, which shows the sidewalk on the north. It switches to parallel parking on the south side of the street, and then again keeping that bike. So the widths change for the drive lanes to 13 feet each, and then the parking lane as 8 feet. But the sidewalk stays at 6 feet and the bike lane stays this. And lastly, 6th Avenue to Summit Boulevard. Goes back to section 1, so that shows the angled parking on the north, and again, the consistency with the sidewalk and bike. And so lastly, that's just an update of where we are today, and next steps looking forward. So Tool Design Group is contracted to finish the plans by the end of this year. So hopefully end of September, we will have final proposed 30% design plans. The next couple of months, they'll continue to incorporate public, town, and council feedback. We also have, I'd like to mention that Chris, our new town engineer, will be looking at these plans. He has already, but he'll be part of the process moving here on out as well. And then what we can see or expect in the future if we continue to move forward. Once we have those 30% design plans, we'll be ready to submit, or we would be ready to submit and release an RFP for 100% construction and design plans. With that process, you would select a consultant team and then we get finalized 100% design plans. Once we have those construction documents, you can expect that the next step would be construction. So with that, a rough estimate to proceed to 100% design is 600,000. So that's really what staff is looking for today. I think we should continue to move forward with this and, look at those next steps on what we can do, such as looking at grants and how we can prepare to move forward with your guidance. And then, of course, after 100% design documents, just keeping in mind that construction costs will also need to be budgeted and looked at. So I'm here to answer any questions. You have all the materials in your packet, so we can look at any of those. Like I said, Janine is here to answer more technical questions if need be.
Thank you so much. Questions, concerns? What are you looking at? He's here and sitting. He's probably already talked about. I have, can you go back into the third Fourth Avenue section? But isn't that because this is the section that's the trickiest, or with
It's this one right
Right,
here.
so this is development, I believe it was developed in the seventies, and it was originally approved with parking in the rear. However, it was never built that way, and as time has gone on, there's been improvements made to the backyards. All sorts of things that would prohibit actually parking on their property like the approved plans show. And so currently they are, that development is parking in front of those units, and it is within the town right of way. So we, this is the HOA we staff met with and talked to options on how we can continue to provide residential parking in this area. With understanding that we wouldn't take away their parking if there's no other solution. But also with the understanding that the overall goal is to keep the, a continuous bike path for efficiency and safety concerns for biking, as well as, just providing parking in general.
Have you determined how many parking spaces they currently utilize and how many will be available in the street?
So it's about 2 per unit right now. So that would be about the full stretch of parking based on what is shown right now. I don't have the exact, yeah.
They're not subject to the no parking on the street from midnight to 6.
So if there would be an agreement in place that we would still have to work through, but we currently, it's happening.
It's been happening. Since
Yeah.
the building had its CEO, I'm quite certain.
Yeah.
That they're-
And the thing about Granite
They
Street
reinforced it.
in particular is the right of way is 80 feet, so it's quite a wide stretch of land that a lot of people don't realize where it begins.
I would say that we're gonna have to come up with a permitted solution for that. For that building.
Janine, just on your expertise, just looking at this, the way the road's offset, does that create any sideline issues or awkwardness of travel kind of doing a little jog?
So that was a concern that was brought up during the meeting, and so our design, we've actually revised it from this. What you're seeing is what was presented in June, and our draft 30% does say make that a little softer. I say generally, I don't see it as a huge concern because it's a 4-way stop. No one should be going straight through that without coming to a complete stop first. So that helps with navigating through the intersections.
But they say no, it should be.
Yes. Depends on who's watching.
Yeah.
Does this design have 4 ways at every intersection? Is that what I'm,
It
Not
just-
or
quite.
just that what I was looking at?
I believe it keeps
There we go.
what was done. under
Here,
the stop
yeah.
optimization.
Okay, yep.
So I think there's 2 that are not a 4-way. Here's it.
First and 6.
Why is that? I know it exists.
It's part of the stop optimization, which I admittedly was not part of, so I can go back and find you an answer. It may have to do with,
Give a thought. Meaning,
Yeah,
an
I'm just trying
opinion
to
on it, is it a good, like, just because it was done then doesn't mean.
understood,
Balance.
and I think we should revisit that because that was another comment we got from the public of wanting 4-way stops at every intersection for consistency. Because right now, it's just 2 that there are, and it's like, well, do I stop, do I not stop? So we can revisit that,
And it's interesting, I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I would have thought if we're trying to give courtesy or speed to not stop. We're making it so you can keep going on the road without stopping, right? Or we,
only 2 blocks.
I understand, but it's
Yeah.
not the people who are living in peak 1 trying to get to Main Street as quickly as possible that we're saving them the stop sign. Saving
Right, it isn't
the
the,
heavily developed side.
it's the official truck route too, so keeping that in mind that there is truck traffic on Granite Street and it is intended to keep that.
Yeah, I'm sure that you've experienced when it was not a 4-way stop at Second. You practically stop there every time anyway, because people just blow right through that stop sign.
In,
Or
on seventh, is it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but on seventh, you currently get onto Granite without a stop sign
No, well, right now, there's a four-way stop.
because of the construction, right?
Because the
But
construction
prior
is-
to that,
That is
yeah,
correct.
that kept that flow, which was actually quite nice. I'm not driving it, so whatever we say.
And that's. We are, I am not.
Engineer, I can tell you all about the road and the drainage and the grading, but as far as traffic, and why we're doing stop signs, I need to talk
And
internally.
tool, yeah,
So
well, also. Tool Design did the stop optimization study. We had a different team on that, and honestly, I was not part of that either, so I just don't have the background knowledge on that. We have all the information to incorporate into.
It's something we can go back and after this meeting, I can talk internally and get a little bit more history and see if we want to revisit where the stop signs are being.
Yeah.
in the vein of understanding planning on plans, right? We're doing great as an organization for where we were with plans, which is awesome. Because we're using them and implementing them. But out of curiosity and for full understanding, it's 600,000 from here to 100%. Where are we at this point?
How much has
Yeah.
been spent? It was budgeted at like 124.
Okay,
I don't know exactly where we're at.
good enough. And then as what at 100%, this then includes all the grades and all of the infrastructure and all of that is in place. So when folks come in for RFP, it's here's what we want you to build. Don't design anything. Tell us what it's going to cost to do this.
Correct.
Is this a conversation for the 2024 budget year?
Well, the 100% design, yes,
Yes.
is it right in your capital,
But not,
proposed in your capital.
not the, you say 9, I say 11.
You'll probably start to see it in the 5-year plan. If we can figure out how to piece it in, because we're gonna put some revenue against it too, from a grant perspective. Meaning your 5-year, your 2024 capital plan won't see any construction money, it'll only be design. Somewhere within your 5-year capital plan, which is a planning document, you'll start to see the construction dollars to implement.
And before we spend 600 to go to 100%, should we see, I mean, honestly, I'm thinking, all right, we're having conversations about doing this building, there goes another 10 to 20 to 30 million dollars. Talking about Granite, there goes another 10 or 15 million dollars. Is this realistic?
Well,
Or should we have that conversation first of what are we prioritizing as our massive capital expenditures before going to 100%?
yes, because based on the way we've kind of lined things up at this point, we have a master plan for town hall that no design. So your complete street design for Granite Street, in my mind, is right now seems to be a higher priority because you're further along. But that might not be. But as a group, we choose when we present the 5-year capital plan.
And I guess my point really is only, I like the design, I like the plan, I hope we can do it. But I don't want to spend 600,000 if we can figure out now that we can't spend 11 million. And that. Chicken or the egg.
I like the idea of prioritizing that 5-year capital there, for sure.
Staff would love that because that gives us very clear direction on where to go first.
My only goal.
And then result being your support of spending the 600,000.
Board of spending the 600 if we know that we're prepared to spend the 11 million, but until we say that.
Well, I
I think it's cart before the horse.
I think it. If you look back to the timeline, I think if we not had COVID. Simply in the construction's portion of this conversation right now. Based on community plans and the community's interest and feedback on this being a priority. I think the only reason we're talking about this now is it got everything else stopped until we figure out the COVID impacts. So I think that's, to me, this would be something I would prioritize over everything else we have conceptual planning. You know, I think it's good to have those documents ready, but this is what we've heard. I've heard the most stuff from the community need. I know town hall is getting tight, but this seems to be something that's more, I've heard more about.
Well, yeah,
over the years, so.
I'm not taking a position on one versus the other, it's throwing them all in the pot.
Yep.
One other thing, if you have plans on the shelf ready to go, much more likely to get grant money. If you have a project that is ready to be built. What helped with the sidewalk project on Highway 9, shovel plan ready to go. Just give us money and we'll build it. It makes it a lot better chances of getting grant money for a project.
Are there elements of this that are likely to attract grant money?
Oh, yeah, I think there's a lot of elements, all the way from the stormwater that we're gonna be dealing with to street safety, multimodal things because of the bike paths and sidewalks. Yeah, absolutely.
There's also, I'll add a lot of planning grants, would count the staff could apply for. And I think we plan to, if this proceeds and gets approved in the budget for the next stage, specifically for complete streets design. So having an actual full like complete streets design actually bumps up our chances for grant opportunities.
That's so confusing.
If we come up, if you ask us, do we approve a $600,000 budget item to go to 100%? What's the motivation to the grant provider to say, well, why would we give them the money? Because they've already committed the money.
And then
So as opposed to,
Agreed.
if that's the way it works, that's the way it works, but it's.
Well, and I think a lot of
counterintuitive.
that will get come to during the budget discussions. So probably as we look at opportunities, what we are hoping for is kind of this community development. Are we on the right track? And I think we're overall hearing that, yes, they're going to complete the 30% design plans no matter what is in the contract. But do you like what you see? And is that the right track for what you envision for this coming to a 30%?
I really like what we see. You guys know one of my biggest fears on Main Street is the bikes. And I love having a safe place for the bikes and pedestrian traffic to go. And really, like, Frank could just use some sprucing up. There's a lot of traffic on there and it does not look great.
And it's not a safe
It's
facility.
not
to walk
safe
out
at
of.
all, not at all.
But your point though, Andy, is interesting. Grant providers, especially the ones at the state that are most likely to be attracted to this type of project. They don't care how much we've budgeted for a design or for construction. All they really care about is have we met the match requirement for their grant?
Okay.
I understand what you're saying, because if you were on a grant committee, you'd be on, can I pay for this? Why do I need to grant them money? They don't ask that question.
There was 100% money, let's donate money to it.
Works. It's different within a tighter community.
Okay.
I would say I thank you, I'm in full support. The things that I think Andy's question is a good one, that bike lane will also be a pedestrian lane, whether we like it or not, and how that looks in 100% design is important, but I'm also not worried about that. I think that's something that is manageable in the long run. And I know routes change and other things change, but on the stop sign layout, I'm totally indifferent, but if there was a way we could make it more sort of friendly for the Summit stage, so they were prioritized in stop sign placement on their routes, so they weren't once always being slowed down. They struggle enough to keep up with their schedule. Like I know that 4-way stop on 8th is a spot where they come through, and if that's a place we could give up a stop sign or two, speed the transit part of this design up, that could be beneficial, but I'm about grants need. But full support to keep going.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
And I want
I think it's a good conversation Andy brought up, and yeah, we're,
And we can follow that conversation, you can follow that conversation, talk about 5-year capital plan, does that make total sense?
Anything else on Granite?
to get fiber all the way down the side.
Not.
This might be something existing out there.
I know it's in there already. Big one.
So it comes on. All right.
All right.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Work on this and. Work on. Thank you.
Can't wait to hear about 1040 radio.
I'm gonna start this by saying, I don't know if you'll be excited or disappointed to hear that I've only got about 15 minutes on this. I know. I knew it would be good, that was my.
He knows what the executive session is about.
Yeah. All pleasure telling you that.
With that lead in from Rick, we are moving on. To really the highlight of this afternoon's work session agenda. And that is 1041 regulations discussions.
You, Mayor.
Now the tax.
We're gonna start.
Wait a minute, you're a policy body, this is what you do.
Yeah, it's like. We're an instructor.
Kind of picture that.
Yeah.
You picture public hearing and angry people from CDOT and.
There's a perfect example of why you need a place going right down to the river. If you haven't heard about it, we'll talk about it later.
This is a little bit of a revisitation. Yes, we talked about this topic in a workshop 3 or 4 months ago now. We did it from a 50,000 foot level. So I'm gonna rewind the videotape a little bit, but a millennial user, I'm gonna put my finger on that little dot, I'm gonna stop the video and move it to the left. At any rate, I want to, at the risk of being repetitive, I do want to talk just a little bit about background on 1041 regulations. House Bill 1041 is the origin of it, the name, way back in 1974. It is now codified as 2465-101 CRS. As it started, it set up a state land board, right? There was a state administrative body that would hear applications for areas of statewide interest and concern. Over time, the statute was amended to put it down at the local level if localities chose to adopt these sort of regulations. The act authorizes both counties and municipalities to designate and adopt regulations for the administration of any of a list of areas or activities of state interest. We'll talk in a little more detail about those in a minute. In fact, my principal purpose tonight is to drill down on scope. Right? I'm not ready to talk with you about the substance or detail of regulations that might be adopted concerning the siting of new arterial highways, right? But what I would like to talk about is the scope of these regulations, right? What is able to be regulated and what we have a desire to regulate, what makes any sense to regulate based on our current zoning code and some other regulations in the code. I'll give you a little preview. We have a whole code chapter called flood hazard areas. It's not likely that we need to adopt regulations that concern the construction of facilities in flood hazard areas. In 1974, when this is adopted, it may well have been useful. In the modern age of regulation, it really isn't, and I think you'll see that in these regulations. So at any rate, it provides authority to regulate in these distinct areas. We're going to get a little more detail about that in a minute. To skip forward, though, once this council provides some directions, and there is a no action alternative here, I guess I should point out, we talked about it yesterday. I think based on council's discussion several months ago, that there is a desire to do something. But there's certainly no requirement and nothing driving this in terms of an immediate project. Although here we have an interesting story about the river here. Once council were to give me direction, just to give you a preview on where we go from here. Once council gives direction on, here are the 1 or 2 or 3 or half a dozen substantive areas that we would like to designate areas of statewide activities or interest, and then regulate and issue permits. Once you tell me that, the next step is for me to prepare a draft set of regulations, both substantive regulations and procedural guidelines as to how those regulations are to be implemented. Then we come back and we hold a public hearing after having advertised it for at least 30 days, not more than 60. We're doing a little statutory dance here to get to the point of adoption. So we would bring those back and we'd set a public hearing. The public hearing is really for the purpose of the council determining whether it wants to designate areas of statewide activities and whether it likes this form, the form of regulations that were presented. If it does, then we have one more step, which is to set a public hearing on adoption of these regulations by ordinance. It's 3 steps from here. There's no real way to avoid it. The statute, I think, sets that up because after all, it is authorizing the locality to regulate things that many think about as being, and all these regulations would otherwise be in the purview of the state agency. So there's lots of process. But to give folks like CDOT, Excel, or anyone else whose activities would be regulated, the opportunity to come in and tell you why they should. So that's what we've got on the process. That's where we have been. I want to talk with you briefly now about scope of regulation that you'd like to see. If you look at, you've got a memo from me in your packet. You also have the complete set of, and this is just by way of an example, because I thought it was pretty complete and a pretty good set of regulations, but a complete set of the El Paso County 1041 regulations. And then you have a broken out document that just shows you that part of the El Paso County regulations that are the arterial highways, just to sort of focus attention. So with that, I guess I would address your attention to the second page of my memo. Here you have the listing from the statute of areas of state interest and activities of state interest. You don't see a lot of designation of just plain areas. You particularly don't see it in municipalities because our zoning code is going to handle regulations for resource extraction, and in most instances, it's not going to allow it just outright. The other thing to remember about this is I'm describing to you a statute that was set up to serve both counties and municipalities, and I would argue that in its inception, more counties and municipalities, right? Municipal zoning and regulation of land use has always been much more intense than county regulation. Counties are also creatures of statute, as you remember, right? There's only like 2 home rule counties in the state. So counties can only do, in terms of regulation, what state statutes expressly authorize them to do. So counties needed this in many ways. Municipalities did not, particularly not home rule municipalities. So that's a long way of saying, I don't think there's any need to designate mineral resource areas as an area for regulation because our zoning code deals with it. Similarly, natural hazard areas, I think in our instance that would probably be limited to slopes. We can talk about the river, but that's dealt with differently under floodplain regulations. So natural hazard areas, again, our zoning code deals with development on steep slopes and provide limitations there. If there are other natural hazard areas that people can think of, and I'm not, I'm happy to talk about it. In my mind, it was all, well, I don't know how you do fire. Some potential. Third, areas containing or having significant impact on historical, natural, archaeological resources of statewide importance. Again, as a general proposition, didn't seem likely to me within the boundaries of the town, and also seemed to implicate some of our existing zoning code provisions with respect to protection of weapons, setbacks, that sort of thing. So again, this one isn't jumping out at me as an area ripe for regulation. And then finally, areas around key facilities in which development may have a material effect on the key facility, the surrounding community. Footnote 2 talks about key facilities is defined in the act to include major facilities of public utility. That's a separate and distinct item. So again, I couldn't really come up with anything under this that jumped out on me as either not having been covered in our zoning code, not susceptible to coverage under the activities of statewide interest, the next list. So moving there, and please stop me at any time, ask questions.
I do.
Sure.
What's the I mean, you kind of said you can't think of something that falls in that category. But if they can, then why not just,
Who is they?
what's the downside to taking the state statute and making and I may be totally misunderstanding the whole concept, but what's the downside to taking the state statute of the broadest applicability possible and utilizing that in our statute?
Because you've already dealt with it in great detail in a number of places in your code already.
But
And so you either be
redundancy,
redundant or inconsistent. Right? You've already got a permitting process, like there is no reason on earth, for instance, to, in my opinion, to adopt regulations concerning.
maybe I'm misunderstanding the fundamental part of this.
Okay,
Aren't we protecting ourselves from the state imposing regulations upon us?
no. You are granting yourself, the statute allows you to grant yourself regulatory authority over this list of activities.
Okay,
You've already exercised your regulatory authority over a lot of these activities. Now, you have not exercised, there are no provisions in the code other than provisions in the subdivision code says, when you subdivide properties for whatever use, you're gonna build streets, right, to provide access. Other than that sort of thing, there is nothing in our code that deals in the slightest way with the site selection and construction of major new site selection development of arterial highways, interchanges and collector highways. There's just nothing. We don't have any regulations. But on the other hand, with respect to site selection of airports, it's a nullity under a zoning code. Our zoning code doesn't allow airports within the boundaries of these are, and even if they did, we don't have room for it. So the idea that we're going to
wait a
regulate
minute.
somebody's.
You're assuming an airport is something that lands planes as we've thought about them in our history. But what if we redefine airports to include drones or the next new?
I would like to look at the statute. I don't think that's within
But-
their purview now, but my response would be deal with the issue when it becomes an issue. Don't try and anticipate what the issues of drone airports are going to be before we're even using drones.
That's sort of why I'm confused of. If we're.
I'm not here to tell you you need to do this at all, right? So let's back up from that.
I know.
I'm not so sure that you do. But there are no
My
things you do or should.
island of confusion alone.
You think, you're just thinking, why don't we cover all our bases?
Yeah.
Rather
And
than
I'm
making
thinking
changes.
a lot of your bases are covered.
Yeah,
But what's the downside to covering them again? Because we're not imposing regulations, we're giving ourselves. the
No,
power.
you're imposing regulations. And what is the point of this is if you want to designate the site selection of airports as an area of activity statewide concern, then you will also adopt substantive regulations.
We will
that
have
site
to,
selection.
we can't just hold it in our pocket.
Correct. You don't just designate, no, you designate and you adopt regulations, both substantive and procedural, by which you will then consider permit applications. The whole point of this.
We would have to follow through beyond.
Yes.
Okay.
Not just designating, right. And nothing prevents you from designating more in the future, right? If drone airports are a thing or flying cars or whatever it may be. Come that day, this process again, you say, well, we've decided we need to deal with the site selection of airports. Because the whole idea of airports has changed and now we're susceptible to it. I would tell you, you're not, your zoning code doesn't allow it. Like,
So we're really looking for like some major hole that has been missed.
I think the suggestion for these regulations was made primarily by Councilor Burley as a means of giving the town a louder voice and a bigger seat at the table with CDOT as it did highway project.
I actually think she's thinking.
The problem with
As opposed to.
Yeah, the problem with-
Your Excel example.
the problem with pipelines is if you're talking about an interstate gas pipeline, you're preempted and you're done. Right? Every set of regulations I've seen on pipelines, as in terms of the regulation of utilities, carves out preemption of FERC, under FERC regulations. FERC says they can put an interstate pipeline here, there, or anywhere, that's what they can do. Because preempted under federal law, the state's preempted, we're preempted, so.
Yeah, but there are pipelines that are not.
Agreed.
That the PUC does have some regulation over.
Agreed, I think you're. Whether you're dealing with that or not, I don't know.
But I think that's where her mind was more going
Yeah.
than CDOT, but CDOT's another great example.
I think there's limited efficacy on pipelines. On CDOT, the question is, do you make friends and influence people, or do you make foes and not? I don't know. So
Today's friend is tomorrow's foe.
No, back to the scoping and down to activities. The first authorized area being site selection and construction of major new domestic water and sewage treatment systems and major extension of existing domestic water and sewage treatment systems. Well, I doubt we want to regulate ourselves on our own water system, and nobody else runs one in town. The question here becomes, want a second bite at the Lakeville apple by way of the sewer district and approving their plant expansion? Because that's what the sentence says. Just be straight up, if you designate the major extension of existing domestic sewage treatment systems, who you will have here for a permit is our sanitation district, if and when they need to create a new cell on their treatment.
So currently, they wouldn't have to go through any of our planning process to expand their facilities.
Well, I won't say that absolutely without looking at our zoning code and our building code. There might be some permitting process in them, but there is nothing that would stop them from making that use or expanding that use that I'm aware of. It's a permitted use at the location. They aren't overbuilt for the site, to my knowledge. So this would put you back into that. Second bite of the apple, so to speak.
That's interesting.
Again,
Why would no?
oh, why would you not? Because the sanitation district might consider that those decisions are for them under their democratic process and the governmental system that they've set up. But they might consider it an overreach.
Okay, so now they don't like us. What happens?
What happens is you can tell them.
Do they
you
sue
can't
it? Do we have the power? Are we headed to a lawsuit or
No,
we're headed to a?
Well, they'll lose. I don't know if we're gonna do a lawsuit or not, they'll lose, right? I mean, what I'm telling you is these things are clearly within your authority. You have a policy decision to make as to whether you want to exercise that authority with respect to given activities and given parties. Because it may not be the thing that you want to do, even though you have the ability to do. And I think the wastewater treatment system expansion is a good example. Those folks, like I say, that's a special district, they have elections, they have a board of directors, they have taxes, they have a service plan.
We have the obligation to protect the town of Frisco from, and with whatever tools we can utilize to further the goals that we believe are the best for the town.
And they'll tell you the same thing with respect to the treatment of sewage.
No, because their mission is to provide an appropriate sewer facility for those who utilize it. We have a far broader scope. Just not seeing the downside, and I beg somebody to explain this.
So, I mean, one of the things I'm wondering is if something like this were to come up, if they wanted to expand. Like, what do we know? Aren't we going to go to the experts and that's them decide whether that's the appropriate step to take.
Wouldn't we know that we don't want that, we don't want them, I don't want to use the project, whether it's Lake Hill or something, you know, new airport, the reserve. This is 30 years ago, or however many years ago, and it's the reserve, and the federal government's going to sell the land to a private developer. Sewer district could control it by saying we don't have enough capacity, but we'll expand our plant. Now we'll build the reserve.
Well, not
And we
not
say,
unless we zone
we
it.
don't want that.
Well, then then we don't zone it. We don't annex it into town. We don't zone it. We zone it for the use that you deem appropriate.
It's done under the county. Did they annex the reserve or was it always in town? I'm just trying, I'm
Seems
trying
like
to
that
use
was-
a
seems
real
like that
world
was-
example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that was annexation.
But for whatever reason, council's opposed to the utilization of the sewer plant for that project. They want an industrial thing. Let's not all be focused on housing. They want to have a noxious use that needs sewer capacity, and we think that noxious use is inappropriate for our town.
Right now, aren't they coterminous? Or essentially coterminous, if they're not exactly the same.
I don't. Meaning that the district is also the.
The boundaries are the same,
Frisco.
right? Or so close to identical that it's.
There's some service that incorporated county.
I know this.
Yeah.
The reason. Next to positive that the county will need to expand, there'll be a new service plan, an expanded service area for the sanitation district to serve Lake Hill or any other development of significant size outside of the town. Yeah. If. I don't know how they're going to get there from here. I mean, we would have the opportunity then to go in and bring back that use, right? But it's just, I just don't know why you need this tool to avoid that situation. For one thing, the folks who vote for you are the same as the folks who vote for the people who control that district board. So I hear what you're saying about we have a broader purpose, but it's the same people making decisions about their community for themselves. Albeit through a different board, but I mean, you're setting this up as though these are some different group of people, right? We've met the enemy, they's us. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same voters, right, making decisions about what the district should allow. Through their board of directors, through electing board of directors, right? But then the board of directors makes decisions about are we gonna expand our service area or not? I just don't, anyway. It's not my call, it's your call, but my point on a lot of this is, which is just gets you much further down the road than you are now, if any. And what it may do is sour your relationship with folks like
But it'll,
the sewer district.
I hate when these things become me. It will only sour our relationship if we disagree and we think we disagree with what they want to do. And if we don't utilize that tool or don't allow ourselves to have that tool of disagreement, pursuing the disagreement in a more aggressive manner, then that doesn't seem appropriate.
Well,
But it would like officially state that we are taking authority over you and could just create a negative relationship just by the fact of us doing that, right? Of us saying, we don't really trust where you're going, what you might do, and so we're gonna do this now in anticipation of you making a choice we don't like.
I'm not sure I understand the sewer district component of this, but when I was looking at CDOT and Excel and they want to do a project, does this not give us the ability to approve their project? That's how I see this.
yes,
Or
well, within the boundaries of statutory criteria and your own.
which is Blue River, is
Yes.
Can we hear the?
So essentially, they have a chain up area, CDOT has proposed right across from their town hall, across the highway. And they don't like that place. So this gives them the authority to permit that project or not.
They've utilized it
And they've,
to the
they
benefit.
they
of
are,
Rivers
they are
Water.
going through that process right now.
It was, I mean, it was like huge safety lights so the truckers could see. Standing in the wetlands. There's some other impacts that. Yeah, they had major concerns about.
Did they already have this in place or they were
They put it in place last year.
in response to CDOT or that
No, they,
kind of luck or they smelled it?
I think it's been on, this project has been on the STIP and they've received some federal funding to implement it. Blue River could see that coming.
Then you wanna go through the rest of.
Yeah, just
your
jump
list and then,
in. So we've
yeah.
got, water sewer. The second is site selection of solid waste disposal sites. Very unlikely within the boundaries of the town, but. If you want the authority, you could get it. Site selection of airports, same issue. Site selection of rapid or mass transit terminal stations and fixed guideways. Here I checked a yes, certainly thought there would be interest there. Fifth is site selection of arterial highways, interchanges and collector highways. Again, a check with a yes. Six, site selection and construction of major facilities of a public utility. So here you've got gas pipelines, power lines, like transmission or high power transmission lines, sorts of facilities. I'm looking for guidance.
But so that one. I think that goes back to, and I know Jess's trying to get here, she texted, she's traffic.
She's flat in our cap project.
So. Like, I know one of the concerns is. Excel wanting to put the gas pipeline from the western slope to Breckenridge. Deep Breckenridge. Would this then, anything coming through town?
Assuming that it was not an interstate gas pipeline, it would be regulatory authority.
Yeah, no, this one's not, this is a. Terminates in Breckenridge.
But does it come across the state line is the what?
I think this one comes.
Yeah, but if all the gas starts there and ends here, then. Into an interstate system.
I could potentially see this being a yes as well, especially with the. Lucky that all our overhead power is buried for the most part, but there's a few. Pipelines still out there.
Probably sort of check.
Yeah.
Seven, site selection and development of new communities. Would be great if you could go extraterritorial with this, but you can't. Doesn't seem to me that we're gonna have many new communities in town and we have a zoning code about this thing. Finally, efficient utilization of municipal and industrial water projects. Again, that's us. Taking care of that. And then finally, the conduct of nuclear detonations, which seemed unlikely to me, so much so as to probably not bear regulation. The campus would know it happened. And we should have regulated that. That is the list. To give you, if you're interested in some labeling of this, I would point you to the Article 8, the Chapter 8, I should say, El Paso County's regulations. This is their site selection of arterial highways and interchanges. Just, right now. I'll point out, there's some middle requirements on page 94, Article 4, Section 8.201, applications and mission requirements. They start with. You're going to give us a list of all reasonable alternative corridor locations for the proposed arterial highway, interchange or collector highway, including a no action alternative. You're going to then provide skipping a couple. You're going to provide a discussion of social, economic, and environmental impacts, level analysis sufficient to adequately identify the impacts and appropriate mitigation measures and to address known foreseeable public concerns. All of these things are to include no impact alternatives. This is just the sort of beginning or tip of the iceberg as you go through the next 2 or 3 pages, right? Noise studies, shadow studies, street lighting studies. Determination of criteria of determination of compatibility with adjacent land uses. This is a very intense set of regulations, which is fine. I just want you to be aware of where this is headed if it's to have some useful purpose. Give us the leverage at the table, I think that we. What I had and what I'm taking from this is a clear yes on highways, mass transit, major facilities of public utility. I'm not sure where to go on sewage treatment.
I'm claiming that I fully don't have a full understanding of this to be able to let you take direction from anything I say.
I'm with Ken, but I'm gonna try with you, I'm gonna try to muddle through what I'm thinking. I mean, I even think this goes to the sewer treatment article, like number 1, right? And I think, say something happens and the sewer district wants to double their size or build out to max capacity on the lots they have. Right, that brings them right up to B1 Marina. I think those are their 2 lots, right? They kind of, right? And I think it's one of those things that once they start building, if we hadn't had something like this in place. And this is going full faith that the sewer district would do something the same district would do, you know, make it as best they can for the community because they're a part of it. But the community that doesn't realize that, they're like, why don't they have to go through the same planning rules I do if I want to build my house, or Walmart did when they wanted to build Walmart? Why are they exempt from town planning process? Which essentially, my understanding is, right now, they currently would be.
No, I don't think they're exempt. They're making a permitted use of their property. And the building code regulations aren't likely to limit them much in terms of intensity, like setbacks apply, our zoning code applies. We just don't have regulations that would allow us to say, no, that's too much. I guess.
For me, I mean, when I went through the memo and read with complete attention all of Bell Pattern regulations, but you know, I could see it being in the town's future best interest. You have a say in any rapid transit terminals that might be coming from DIA to here, and not just have that forced upon us, like medians with just dirt in them. Highways finished. Same for the highways, which Blue River, I think, has seen and benefited from. You know, I think those are continued conversations that I would like to have around having these rights, what do they call them, regulations. And I think the public utility, I think we are in a precarious place, but a fortunate one, but we're kind of at the end of every different line from the best I've learned over the years. And there's a lot of interest to try to get more capacity to keep up with our growth. It's got to come through here one way or another, actually.
An example that we've always heard about or participated in is the roundabout project at the Gap, where CDOT came in with off the exit 45 miles an hour to Breckenridge. That was plan A. And we luckily had a good relationship and open discussion and, you know, and a coalition of citizens groups that got together and came forward and was like, that sounds crazy. How about a couple of roundabouts? And we all kind of got together and CDOT was like, some of this work is workable, some of it isn't. In that, okay, well, how about a couple of stop signs? And then it was, well, roundabouts are traffic calming. This, you know, it was a back and forth. It was a good, healthy conversation. My point in saying this is, if we didn't have a particular ally within CDOT, meaning a really good relationship with that person, we wouldn't have gotten what we had. But if they had just said it's 45 miles an hour with a stop sign at Main Street, that's what you're getting. These regulations give us the opportunity to say, let's go back to the table, please. That's how I simplify this. Don't necessarily, I can see how that can cause a relationship. But only if it's implemented, like I think if we come at, we don't change our posture, we just have this as another tool. Is how I'm seeing it. Is that fair?
It will change the posture that it will require with the application, it will require a public hearing in front of the council. And you can't get around it because that's what the state statute says. Take on this authority. So
Is that much different than an open house with a bunch of people and CDOT talking to them?
well, the application is gonna be that thick, and you're gonna have 25 statutory criteria and a staff memo about. I mean, facetious, but
Yeah.
it's different. They're gonna feel differently about it, mostly, right, because they will have gone through much preparation and done a lot of things they wouldn't otherwise have to do their project. It is what it is, right?
Is it waivable?
It what?
Waivable.
Yeah. I would want, I'm hesitating because I want to think about how those various submissions are going to relate to your approval criteria. Because at the end of the day, you gotta make a decision under these criteria. And if you've waived a bunch of the things that would have given you evidence in support of it, leaves us in a strange decisional posture. Suspect that
There's not an entity in the world or in the country that thinks that the development approval process is not overbearing and overwhelming. And by the fact that we're asking government to do a process that creates a stack of paper and an extra element of work and money. And I have a lot of sympathy for that. If they stop doing it to the developers, then I'll stop doing it, thinking they should have to do it too. And that's I don't think. Have to work with harder, yes, like your project. Your project.
So you think, Andy, on that, because I'm totally with you, I'm trying to figure out where we go and how we keep the conversation going, but. Say it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever, whoever wins the lottery tonight. Funds the mass transit from DIA to the mountains. We have this Silverthorne doesn't. So see, that's like, oh, I'm sorry, Frisco, you lose, you're too cumbersome to work with, because of this, we're gonna put the transit hub in Silverthorne. Or we're gonna bypass it and put
That's
it
what happened between Golden and Denver back on the rail.
I mean,
I
But
don't know,
they're-
I wonder about their prioritization, because they seem to have a lot of discretion, so I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or is it, they look on a bigger planning, look, this is the makes the most sense, we just have to deal with what.
I think they have to base it on utility between the two businesses. But I mean, doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Luckily, Silverthorne has 1041 regulations.
They do.
Not sure they do for that purpose, but.
No.
Doesn't have to be adverse.
I mean, the other way you can look at it today from a work session standpoint versus going into the three-step process that you're gonna have to go through is that you could also think about it. To give direction to put that in, think about it, you can take it out during your process. You know,
Having read it.
yeah, because then you'll have the substance of what the implementation is.
If we had had these in place, say, over the last 5 years, what would have been affected by it? What projects with CDOT or with whoever would have been affected by it? And what kind of time and effort would that have?
If we didn't like the interchange plan, we would have a say in how that unfolded, right?
But if I'm hearing you correctly, if we put this in place, every project they do is gonna have to go through a different process with us. So I guess that's what I'm curious about, like,
So an example would be that in your last plan that you did in the last year, and you put in an underpass at the creek under Highway 9. And if CDOT was rebuilding that road and didn't put that in their design and said, right, we just can't afford it.
It would then become inconsistent with one of your adopted criteria, which was consistency with our XYZ plan.
And you could enforce
And you
that,
could deny that.
which would cause a negotiation with CDOT.
Receive a phone call, somebody to see that. Just as I was happy to receive a phone call from the retailers and the bottlers on the plastic, I would welcome a conversation to understand this from those who are impacted by it. They're the state, they, along with whatever other entities we encumber with this. They're part of the stakeholders.
I mean, they're the most visible just because they already have the facilities going through our town. And I would bet that they would argue that their processes, their mandated processes, both state and federal mandates, already take care of all of this. But that's still from their perspective.
Jumping topics, but the bottlers say they're.
Yeah.
Recycling. Utilizing that information will make decisions.
So consensus on four topics. Highways, mass trans, public utilities, and sewage treatment system.
And I personally like to see that back to work session to kind of see what those. I'm doing.
So, okay, it's 4 steps, work session.
The,
Public
and I
utility.
think a part of that, we could also want to be, I would like to be very cognizant of is. What is, I'd love to know, like, talking to Michelle or other communities that have had to exercise some of these. Ordinances, like, how cumbersome has it been for staff? To make sure this happens, because. I don't want to create something that we have to create a whole nother 5 positions just to deal with this. We should never be that big at that kind of town, but what that truly looks like. For other communities that have that.
I'll get that information.
Because I think we have to weigh that as well, that we're not creating something that just sinks.
I think you're gonna see it very similar to a development review process. And it could be that on a certain topic, you might have to hire an expert to help you review that.
That actually raises a good procedural point. For these draft regulations, one of the things that I will provide is the procedural portion, which is required. Under state statute, the council or the designated authority, usually the council designates itself, is the final decision maker. The statute allows, though, for you to push this to another body like the planning commission for a recommendation. Along the lines of making it more like a typical development application, would you like to see that as part of the process?
There are in-house, they're the next level of experts.
That was my thought.
Outside of staff.
Silverthorne, Blue River, what other towns in the county?
I think Summit County writes 1041.
Yeah. The counties make more use of these than for a long time.
Desi's remark, because she can't get on for commenting and missed a lot of it, but. She says Northwest Cog, the Q board has some good examples of. These have been helpful for other communities in Northwest Cog. Provided a contact person so we can. Reach out to them as we bring this back for more
conversation.
I can see her, she's on there.
He just didn't catch enough of the early part of the conversation to know.
Wow, got it.
Any other thoughts concerning anything that was off the table?
Okay.
All right.
In the upper.
I mean, just need often.
I'll go with, I don't know.
So I will come back with regulations addressing 4 substantive areas and providing the procedural requirements. Likely 1st or 2nd September.
Yeah, break those up into chunks depending on.
Thank you for.
Sure.
And for continuing to.
Yeah.
Really kind of a unique and weird. Holding a local authority under state rules. Because it started out as something different than what it is now. It started out as a state process, not a local. All right, thank you. Let's go direction.
Opposite of what? 234 or whatever.
Exactly,
To us.
exactly.
It's a,
It is, no, everything is just
Flipping
going
the-
ahead. It seems like from Morby's perspective, not that recent.
you put all the work in to have a zoning plan. We're going out the-
That new communities one, because I've seen examples in my past life of where the state has done that too.
Yeah. Here's my 50,000 foot from the Senate bill.
Wouldn't say that this legislature.
Yeah. There is a line of, we all know that local authority, right? Strong in Colorado, right? There's a line of cases as long as in my arm saying in no uncertain terms that zoning is a matter of purely local concern, says it over and over in 20 different contexts. Purely local concern. That means the state can't come in and tell you what to do about density in your R1 district. In theory, that's what that means. That will probably be upheld. That's my better guess. The legislature can talk about all the statewide interests that they want. They make all the declarations that they want. And then they're gonna have to go to a court of law. And the state is going to have to overcome, the attorney general is going to have to overcome, like I say, list of cases as long as my farm. That says municipalities are in charge of their zoning, period.
We just haven't gotten to that.
Well, we haven't got that, but we will, and to me, that was part of the silliness of this legislative effort like this. It's like, why don't you guys figure out where your boundaries are and then see if you can't stop it.
Was the article of yesterday, was it Lakewood? In Colorado Sun, I missed it. Anyway, it's Lakewood that's
The limits.
that's dealing with they have
Growth limits.
growth, yes, and so the current law is challenging that. I would assume that Lakewood's gonna.
Oh, they'll go straight to you.
Yeah.
I know. I know Lakewood law. They will try to defend their home rule authority and say this is none of your
And they probably will have other communities in the state that will join. that.
Yeah, a goodly portion of it.
Sorry, it's too late.
Well, at that place, I mean, you could drive. They closed. They closed at 6.
They're close to 6.
Dial-
You go somewhere else.
Oh, because it's been working there since for 3 doubles.
Yesterday.
Yeah, they're closing it. But there going to be other.
Yeah.
Same way.
Well, if nothing else, we will reconvene for the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. You.
Yeah.
Wait to see how you summarize that.
Monday at 9 o'clock AM tomorrow to
Foundation.
follow up on Delaware guy.
Good evening, everyone. 7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Frisco Town Council. Can I have the roll call, please?
Aronson.
Here.
Burley. Here. Mortensen.
Here.
Lincoln.
Here.
Malenko. Here. Check Adrian is absent, Held is absent.
Thank you. First up this evening is public comment. Anyone who wishes to make public comment on anything that's not on this evening's agenda may do so now. Please be topic specific. Keep your comments no longer than 3 minutes. State your name and address for the record, please. Yep.
Yes, my name is Arlene Dinkle. I live at 1501 Point Drive in Frisco. That's Prospect Point condominiums. We had a very bad flooding issue there, along with many other places, I'm sure. The problem is we're getting very bad runoff from the dam road. It comes right down, not on the road, it comes down the ditch next to the road and next to the grassy area. Water, gravel, twigs, whatever else. And it has come down the side of our entrance road there. Doesn't come on the grass, it comes down the side of the entrance road. And I live in building 1501, which is the first building. I live on the far lower side towards the fire hydrant there. My garage got filled with water 3 times. I had to scrape it out 3 times. It was halfway full because all the debris from the road area came down and blocked our drainage. And this does it every time it rains, but this rain was just horrendous. I have pictures too that I will email to Stacy. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. But I live alone and I can't be trying to scrape out my garage every time this happens. I'm wondering if there's a solution that you can come up with and possibly get it fixed so that we don't have this road drainage coming down. It's not from the road. I'm sure there's some water from the road too, but I have pictures where you can just see it. It's just pouring down. And it's carrying all the mud and gravel and twigs and grass. And it just covered our drainage ditch there. And the water could not get down. I have a picture too by the fire hydrant there. I don't know if you've ever been through there or not. There's an eddy going there. It is so full of water. I had about 1.5 inches of mud in my garage the first time with that first torrential rain. And then it rained. I got that cleaned out. I had some help with one of our HOA people came over. And then it rained again after that. Backed up again, the whole thing, totally, water and mud halfway into my garage. And then on Wednesday, it happened again. And I said, I've talked with the HOA people. They're trying to find a resolution, but I think the resolution is going to have to come from the town because that's where it's coming from. We have taken care of our area there with our own French drainage that runs the whole length of that building. And when it gets blocked up, all the water comes in. I'm not the only one that had water in my garage. My neighbor next to me, one door up, he had it went in about 3 foot on his garage. And a couple other neighbors too. But I just wanted to bring this before you and see if there is anything that can be done about that. And this isn't the first time that this has happened. Every time it rains, that washout comes down. And we have sand and gravel directly across Point Drive there at the stop sign. And actually, I've fallen once already on it, going to get the newspaper. That's about all I have to say. Is there anyone that we can talk to try and correct this problem?
When you email those photos, can you just make sure your contact info is in there?
Okay, I will give you the manager of our property, and you probably know Kevin Lovett. He's with the SRG there, and he runs that property too. But they couldn't make it tonight. I asked somebody to come with me, but they said they couldn't make it, so. Do you think that something could be done there?
We will follow up, yeah, without Public Works here and seeing what's going on and knowing the particulars of that setup. We will follow up with you for sure, though. So
Is it a town jurisdiction or is it county?
that again, without immediately having all the right maps and whatnot in front of me, I'm not 100% sure. So we'll follow up and see what we can.
I think it's the town. I think it goes down further, the town jurisdiction, so. Okay, well, thank you very
Thanks
much.
for bringing it to our attention, because this is how we find things out to make sure that we.
Yeah, well, it's hard for me because I just can't do this anymore, and this was terrible.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you very much.
Thank you for letting us know. Any other public comments this evening? Anyone online? None online and none in chambers. I'll close public comment. Back to mayor and council comments.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff. I was hoping it was gonna happen. I don't think I have any comments as well.
Nope.
Well, staff updates that weren't in the packet.
Okay, I've got a few. This coming weekend, I believe, Run the Rockies, 10K and half marathon. Saturday at PRA. Your Arts Council has their second project coming with some street art coming out that I think you've heard about already. We'll see that within the next week. And then Leslie, want to talk? Committee report.
So we have given you all in front of you, you will find a nice hardbound copy of the 2022 community report. We generally try to not print things out for you. We no longer print the budget. We no longer print the annual financial report. But this is a really nice condensed version that in 22 pages gives you a lot of information. So we did decide to print you one all out so that you could have a record of things that you've helped to accomplish during your time on council. So it does provide a lot of information in there. It lists all of you, the town council. It lists the leadership team, an org chart, some demographics, awards that we've won. It summarizes the strategic plan, provides some financial data, lists the nonprofit grants that you all decided on, and many accomplishments in housing, sustainable environment, recreation, core services, including PD, Public Works, and then lastly, some contact information and ways to stay connected. So that is also on our website, and our communications department will be preparing some information to share out with the public through some social media blasts.
Presumably for sale at a local bookstore near us. All Any other updates that weren't in the packet? Then next up this evening is the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Been moved to approve the consent agenda by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Burley. Any discussion on the motion? None. Can you call the question, please?
Incan.
Yes.
Morton.
Yes.
Absent. Aaron. Yes. Burley. Yes. Held is absent. Palenko.
Agenda passes. Next this evening is new business. This is agenda item number 4. This is resolution 23-20, a resolution amending a housing helps restrictive covenant. I'll open up the public hearing, turn over to staff. Katie. Good to see you.
We'll get the brief presentation just outlining the staff report and attachments that were in your packet. I can, see it, but I don't know if they can see it. Stacy, thank you. Perfect. Okay. What I want to just review is a quick background on this as a refresher for you, and then also make sure you're aware of kind of what you're looking at approving through the resolution. I have 2 primary questions for you I'll focus on, and those I'll note for you as I get to them. So just very briefly, the background of the Frisco Housing Helps Program is that it was established in August of 2019. In June of 2021, we kind of did a what's called Housing Helps 2.0, which was when we moved into, so just get this into the actual slideshow here, kind of some modifications that were performed at that time. Most recently, we had a application come into the town for a housing helps, and that brought up some questions that it wasn't necessarily permitted, but staff came to the town council to get some direction on if that was an option that they wanted to consider for housing helps. So as a refresher for you, at May at a May meeting in 2023, you discussed and kind of directed the town attorney and town staff to work on modifications to the program, which could potentially allow a retiree to live in that unit, and have the town acquire a deed restriction from them for that unit despite their working status. So before you tonight is documents that include resolution 2320 itself. As you noted in your packet, this includes a new option 6, and that option 6 is what you're looking to make sure you're okay with what we're proposing tonight that would become part of the Housing Helps program. Also included is the modified residential housing restrictive covenant. Wanted to note we will have this for Housing Helps purchases of deed restrictions that are under option 6. So basically there's different covenants. This covenant would only be used when utilizing it through option 6. And then the same with the purchase agreement, that would also only be used when going through this new option 6. So a couple things to note. Not going to read this for you. I know you're familiar with it. I just wanted to highlight in the restrictive covenants today for Housing Helps, the definition of resident is proposed to remain exactly as it is. So we're not proposing definite change to that definition. And what we're doing instead is going to the occupancy restriction part of that restrictive covenant. And through that occupancy restriction, in the bold underline font here is what is new and being inserted into this covenant that is different from what we have today. So this language is basically stating that under option 6, if this covenant is used, the declarant or the person who is residing in the property shall be considered a resident regardless of whether he or she works. And what's also important to note is that this will only apply the working status to the person we're buying the deed restriction for. So there's a little extra language in here, that last part of the bold underlined statement, regardless of whether he or she has resided previously in property that was deed restricted. And we also wanted to note that, sorry, I got off track right there. I jumped ahead in my head. Sorry about that. So what we're looking at is occupancy restrictions, and is it okay that at this time, this person does not have a working status? Sorry. So one of the questions for council tonight, and I'll put these on the final screen of the presentation, is does the council support a declarant being considered a resident regardless of whether he or she works? And that's the way that the wording is going into the covenant as proposed to you tonight. Moving on to the resolution 2320 that option 6, the one we're speaking about tonight, does specifically state that the restriction does not apply to the current property owner with respect to work requirements. However, the next owner does have to qualify with work requirements. So this is kind of that clause catching to make sure that that unit cannot sell to somebody in the future who also may be retired. It's just the initial purchase will be from a retiree. Or I should also state, because we're not using the words retiree, somebody who is not working. And connected to that is the question for the council about supporting the language with option 6 in the resolution. This is a little bit unique in the background to this, and this is why we wanted to explain it. And thank you to our town attorney who drafted this, thinking about it ahead of time, is if we have an owner who is not working, does the town council want to consider how much money they're going to pay for that deed restricted unit based on potentially how long that current owner is going to reside in the property? So if it happens to be a owner who isn't retired but doesn't work, and the town has the option or an application and they want to pursue getting a deed restricted covenant from somebody who doesn't work, but it may not be resold for say 50 years, do you want to pay them as much money for that deed restricted unit as you would somebody who is retired and maybe selling within the next couple of years? So, and don't know if this has been discussed too much with the council, and I can tell by the looks on your faces, I think this is new, which is why we wanted to bring it up to you. And so I want to make sure you're aware this has been drafted into the resolution, and we want to get your feedback to how you feel about this language. If you're okay with it, then we please go ahead and approve the resolution as attached. And I just kind of summarized those 2 fine point questions for you. So.
We had some discussion when we talked about some of the more legal aspects of this, and we got some legal advice in the workshop. We talked about the fact that well, we discussed the potential that less would be paid for these restrictions as a general proposition because they were not providing. I should also say that other than these changes that she's described and one other change concerning housing for disabilities, the restriction is dead identical to the current housing house restriction. Right? So all, you can't short-term rent it. Everything in that current restriction is here except for this issue. So there was discussion at the time along lines of, given that this is not going to give us the workforce housing right now, some point in the future obviously will, but not right now, should less be paid for it, as opposed to a workplace restriction that either the seller, the declarant, met right now, or in the context of a what am I trying to say, down payment assistance, right? They are going to meet the requirements of the covenant as they move in. So I think there was general consensus that yes, that ought to be worth less than the covenant that gets us everything we expect right away. As I was drafting this then, it occurred to me, what does it mean to be retired? How long must you have worked? How old must you be? Those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, I kind of threw up my hands and said, that's not the real issue here. The real issue here is how long is it going to be before the town gets the full benefit of this covenant and that it imposes a work requirement on the resident. So that was my suggestion, and that was the additional language in the resolution. I haven't given you the answers to how much less, but staff has given guidance that they are to consider that. Tom kind of half jokingly said, well, what should we do? Go to an actuarial table? And my response is honestly, yes, I think that you should. Because if you're buying this from somebody who is 40 years old and has a life expectancy of 30 years, unless we have some reason to think they're going to leave or some promise for them that they are, then I'm thinking you probably ought not pay too awful much for it, or at least understand that whatever you're paying for, you're only meeting your goal of residency.
Finally.
Let's hear where they are.
Okay, let's.
So anyways, just a little, to flesh that out a little further.
We've got time.
Can you back a slide while we're doing this? Thank you.
We're just buying the restrictive covenant.
That's it.
That's it. They retain the owner of the property. They're just selling us the covenant. That will require that they reside in the property full time and they not short-term rent it, but will not require that they meet the 30 hours a week working requirement. Only the next subsequent owner.
How much money?
We,
helps?
15% will usually look
Yeah,
at the value.
15% has been given on down payment assistance, where the work requirement will be met immediately. Now, how much less than that you should pay 5 years out and 10 years out and 15 and 20 years out, I think is something for staff to think about and maybe create some policy. But I wasn't ready to draft that into the resolution itself, at least not without more direction. No.
Essentially, it's just saying, we're gonna pay you $15,000 and a deed restriction goes on the house. And that's it. Yeah. Yep. And then that's it. We're done with any
And then when they
transaction.
sell, the next buyer has to meet the work requirement.
But that could be 30 years
Yep.
Yeah.
And so.
But in that instance, my suggestion is rather than giving 15%, you should get 0.5%. I mean, it ought to be, I would think there's gonna come a point where it's just, there's no economic incentive for someone that young to do it because they don't really get much value now. And there may be a significant diminution in value later. So make your sellers make that decision. And don't make it easy, I guess is my suggestion if you're concerned about age.
In the legal way for whoever's owning this, and if we do option 6, they pass away for whatever reason, it goes into a state. Does whoever inherits it has to either meet these requirements or sell it to someone who does, because they're not the.
Or I think there's the allowance for the rental, right, at rates approved by the town if you're a non-qualified owner. So I guess an estate could be a non-qualified owner if you get permission of the town, can we rent this at X rate?
I think if we threw this proposal out there and said, make this as confusing and challenging on staff for the rest of the existence of Frisco, we couldn't do a better job than this. I wouldn't burden staff with this. I mean, if I'm a 60-year-old 3-pack-a-day smoker with emphysema and diabetes, and my neighbor runs up Mount Royal 3 times a day, are you gonna make that decision of how long am I gonna live? Like, I would not suggest making determinations based on health questions. But I think you can look at the 60-year-old and say actuarially speaking, because that takes in the folks with emphysema and the runners. You can legally do it. Morally, I think it's offensive. If we want to set an age, yeah, I got no problem with that. You work here for 7 years, you're over 62, 65, 70, I don't care what age. But then we have parameters, somebody evaluating the question, do I qualify? You can look them in the eye and say yes or no,
Yep.
I don't believe in complicated, and this is really complicated.
But remember, please, that there are limitations in our ability to discriminate against people based on their age. And by your suggestion, what you're saying is that people under a certain age are not qualified. By my suggestion, I'm saying we are making determinations based on your age. It's like a life estate, right? What are you going to pay somebody for a property if they retain a life estate? Well, it depends on how old they are. It's the same thing, but I'm not quite as comfortable saying, if you ain't 62, you're not eligible for this program. I think that concerns me a little more because that we do over 55 communities.
Yeah.
Under special federal, under special allowance of federal law under the Fair Housing Act amendments. There are limitations that specifically address communities for seniors.
I'll state mine and then be done with it. If they're gonna live there full-time for the rest of their lives and they live 40 years, the town got a benefit. I just can't imagine imposing this complication on of subjectivity on staff.
Let me ask a covenant question, because Housing Helps doesn't, there's no AMI. Right, so going back to the estate and non-qualified owner rental thing. If if the original covenant was not AMI based, what does that rental requirement become? Because the way you just stated it made it sound so,
Requirement, it becomes a requirement that they work to some.
right, so it's
rent to
the
somebody
like deed
employed. You're
restricted
right.
light.
It's not, you're
Okay,
right.
I just wanted to clarify
You're right.
that.
It's the equivalent.
Okay. I'm with Andy. Like I'm not sure that this is gonna be used that often. Perhaps it will be, but if it is, I do feel like, you know, these folks who are requesting this are a benefit to our community as well. And while our original housing program was intended for workforce, I don't think that this flies in the face of our program or our community goals, and that we have people who live here full time. And to me, that's important too. Right. I mean, maybe there are, and we can come back and put parameters on it, but I don't feel like designing everybody out of the opportunity from the get-go it doesn't feel right either to me. I'm with you.
You say it better than I do. Thank you.
Open it up for maybe public comment. We'll come back to council discussion.
Oh, yeah, let's skip ahead.
Mostly I'm buying time to try to
Yes.
find something. Is there, I will at this time open up for public comment. Anyone wish to make public comment on this particular agenda item? Seeing none online and none in chambers, that didn't buy me much time. I'll close.
Are you
public-
sure, Kyle?
So essentially you still have to. I have these, I'm trying to wrap my head around my questions and my thought. You still have to live in the house for 7 years before you even qualify to put in this application.
And to have worked here for
And
7
to-
years, right?
Just
Directly to it,
Just reside.
resided in the property,
And it could be a second, like you have to prove residence.
principal residence.
Principal residence. Yeah, no, please, because I need, I'm struggling.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Not getting what we want out of it for 30 years.
By then it is cheap.
I'll also note, just to keep in your heads, it is an application process. So you're not guaranteed just because you're interested in it. It has to go through the town to check things over. So I just want to make that clear also. So. Correct. We'd look at what the property is, what condition it's in, what the value is, things like that. Mhm.
There are definitely properties that won't make sense to be a workforce, even live work.
Yeah, most of the applications we get now that we cannot accept. We had 2 last week, for example, but it's people whose employment are more than 1 mile outside of the 10-mile basin, and they're just kind of applying anyway. So that's more of what we're seeing as an obstacle for applications that we're telling them we can't pursue what they've applied for.
This person's application side, what's the motivation to live in a place for 7 years? And then, and correct me if I'm wrong, and then sell a deed restriction on that property, you get, is it just a money grab? I mean, at 800,000, according to the community plan I just read, the average, it's 120,000 we would be paying for these. So is this a retirement nest egg, if you will? That's a full philosophical.
It is, and I think that would, and you acknowledged it, would be accurate.
We are.
They just don't turn into a six box.
There's that. Well, and also,
They care about, so I think it's.
I think this program is also designed not to pay the owner any more money than the property will be diminished in value later, right? I mean, so I don't know that the money, it's money in advance of when it might otherwise be received.
It could be new roof, new kitchen. Not just cash grab. This is what it takes to stay here.
And this was the difference between 1.0 and 2.0 when we first, like, we had eliminated opportunities for HOA assessments and paying for the new roof. And like, we carved we said no to all of that because we felt like it was, you know, this money grab, but really our goal is a housing stock to build housing that does not turn into short-term rentals or whatever. Investment properties, second homes, we wanted to, you know, make sure that we had units that people lived in. And that was our goal. It doesn't, you know, the motivation of the seller is not our problem. Our goal is the housing stock. So their motivation, if they're savvy enough to figure that out, great. We're getting housing stock out of it.
Just you saying you're in support, but minus the languages.
Correct.
Language of,
Yes.
variable then.
Yes.
I think I would tend to. I think the way you put that, Jesse, is important, like that is the goal, like.
What is our goal?
Diversity of
Our goal
housing
is the
stock.
housing stock.
Seems to help you another avenue to achieve that. I think I would support it minus that. Occupancy. What restrictions were we?
Yeah, we need the occupancy restriction, but not the second part of
Yeah,
that.
Second part.
It's the language of the resolution, describing option 6. Go through the options and you've got, paragraph describing options 1 through 4, paragraph for option 5, and then paragraph for option 6. Well, based on the discussion, the motion would be on that paragraph concerning option 6, everything after the first sentence would be deleted.
Is the person, there's somebody at the table,
Correct. We have a pending application.
how tight of a time frame are we?
She's been checking in to see the status of it, but I think, I mean,
I personally would rather, that's why I don't, if they're on a time frame, we can probably do it, but I'd rather see this in final form.
Yep.
Clean version, as opposed to do a first
Mhm.
reading with amendments and all that crazy stuff.
Yeah. we can modify it if that's the consensus of the council and then bring it back again.
Able to.
That's right terminology, yes.
It is just a resolution. This is not a reading ordinance. This is one reading resolution.
Then I believe that even more so that we're clear of exactly what we've passed.
I know none of this matters.
It all
But
matters.
if I-
It all matters.
If I lived in a house for 7 years. I retired, or I retired and then lived in a house for 7 years. I then came to the town. And got into this program, got paid my 15%. I would essentially be living I'll be selling a work-live deed restricted unit. Which typically sells for 10% less than market. So you're coming out 5% ahead in the end.
In theory.
It's an option. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just acknowledging that it exists.
But again, we're paying the
We're still getting that.
percent
Your assumptions are true.
for
Yeah.
each cell, so probably a price.
No, and we're still getting stock. I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm just following law.
So you need a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I move that we table resolution. Oh dear,
23.
thank you, 2320 till August 22nd. Do I give a date?
Sure. Yeah, that's easy.
To have staff bring back the changes as discussed.
Move to table till August 22nd. Councilmember Burley is there. Second by Councilmember Blanco. Any discussion on the motion? None. Can you call the question?
Blanco. Yes. Egan.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Scripcheck, Adrian is absent. Aronson.
Yes.
Early.
Yes.
And Hope.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks.
They're tabling.
We've
Second,
been like
bouncing back and
3
forth.
times in 7 years. Tabled anyway.
Next up this evening's agenda item number 5. This is first reading ordinance 23-15. Authorizing an amendment to the development agreement between the town of Frisco and the NHP Foundation dated as of May 23rd, 2023. In order to add certain real property to the legal description of the real property that is subject to the long-term ground lease for the town to the NHP Foundation. Here, over to staff.
Want to start that, or do I want to start? Why don't I start with the legal background and then I'll turn to you for some of the policy. As you're aware, the town is under a development agreement with NHP. It concerns both the 101 Main Street property and the 602 Galena Street property. With respect to the Galena Street property, the obligation of the town is to provide an option for a long-term ground lease, so that ultimately they would control the property, but they need to be able to show that control to CHAPA right now, along with their development application that they're processing. That agreement withheld from the legal description of what I'll call the entirety of 602 Galena, an amount equal to 1/8, 12.5%. The town reserved it to its own ownership. There was a description of the area, but there was also an agreement in the agreement that we might talk about some different area of equal size and amend the agreement accordingly. That is not what happened as a result of the planning process. And I'll let Tom explain what has happened to the planning process, but the technicality of this amendment is to do nothing more than amend the legal description of the ground lease option area to add back in that 1/8 that we had reserved to the town's ownership. That I'll turn it over.
And Lauren from NHP is here to give more detail than I'm going to provide, hopefully answer some of your questions, but essentially, as I understand it, NHP has been going through the planning process based on what was originally going to be a modular type build with podium parking underneath the buildings and some surface parking. We were going to get approximately 46 to 48 units out of that, with also this reserved portion for possibly to fulfill the workforce center obligation, possibly childcare. Through the process of investigating different types of ways to build the building, modular is no longer an option because of price. So they're looking at a stick-built building that actually gains more units, so up to 54 units, I believe, and Lauren will give the detail on that, as opposed to the 46 or 48 number. And surface parking obligation for that building. So with that, why don't you?
I'm sorry, for that building. Galena, thank you.
I also have the jump drive.
Blue chair.
That's the ceremony.
Your
term limit is up and then you get to take it.
Yep.
Oh, no, I'm gonna purge it at the senior rummage sale.
I'm leaving the town.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I didn't see any of the amendments to the agenda. It's not.
Oh, come on now.
I like the blue chair.
Okay.
What would we do without it?
Took it all
To auto present, sorry, it's all going.
then you can control.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Good evening. Good evening, Town Council. It's nice to see you guys again. It's nice to be in Frisco again. For the record, I'm Lauren Avioli, Project Manager with the NHP Foundation, and I'm here to add a little bit more information to those amendments to the development agreement that are on the agenda tonight that staff introduced. So I think Thad might have mentioned this briefly, but one of the amendments is to prevent some potential issues in the future with funders, lenders, investors being worried about a cross default issue on 602 Galena if we have something come up on 101 West Main during the tax credit application process that would prevent us from maintaining site control on Galena while we're still working on that project. So that's the first one that you would see in the ground lease option agreement, where there's a modification under option term in B. But the other amendment is the one that I wanted to talk at greater length about, and that's the one that Tom brought up regarding amending the legal description of 602 Galena as it's referenced in the development agreement and the option to ground lease. And as Tom said, the reason that we're requesting this is because we did several pricing exercises on variations of the development program where we have podium parking, tuck under parking below 3 stories of rental units, modular or stick built. And the pricing was coming back so high that it was making it really infeasible to continue with that approach. Obviously, the pros there were that the footprint was going to be smaller, enabling the town to have about 0.14 acres or something of that general size for a future development. But as we go through the numbers, which I'll show you in a moment, we really do believe that a surface parked approach is the right path to close the gap and develop the site for housing. So to help you visualize what we're talking about here, I have some renderings kind of comparing the two. So this site plan was the structured parking scenario that we initially proposed. Tract B would be that 0.14 acres that the town could use for future development for workforce, office, daycare, or other uses. And then tract A was the structured parking with 3 stories of apartments. And as Tom said, we were able to get this up to 54 units. But the size of the garage drives the placement of the units, the dimensions, they're really prescribed by how big the garage needs to be. So that lent itself to this U-shaped building that you see, which isn't terribly efficient. You see some kind of wide hallways, some dead space that we're not really able to do anything with because the garage needs to be how big the garage needs to be. We also, in order to stay below the height limit, but add a 3rd story of units, would need to excavate a good amount to get the parking to fit. And that 3rd floor would have 18 units. So without it, we would be looking at only 36 units in this scenario. So a little too small to really make the project pencil. And so this is a rendering of the structured parking option. You can see the tuck under parking kind of in the bottom right corner, and then you get a little bit of a feel for the U shape toward the center. And so after we did quite a few back and forth pricing exercises, we decided to return to the design and work with our architecture team and figure out what it would look like if it were surface parked. And so we were able to surface park and create a more rectangular, simplified building, but it did require the full site. We are parking all the required parking on site here. And I've also drawn in some on-street spaces that I can talk about later. But the parking that would be needed for residents and visitors is able to be provided on site. So with this option, we have a much simpler building. We're at like 90% efficiency, which is pretty high. We have less dead space, narrower corridors, and have, provided sort of the minimum stairwells and elevators to also kind of drive down costs. So simpler and more efficient. And we don't have to excavate. We can fit all 3 stories below the height limit here and maintain 54 units of housing. And so here's the rendering of this option to give you a little bit of an idea. They're pretty similar in bulk and facade treatment. And so between the 2 pricing exercises, we did some value engineering to save on appliances and finishes, maybe about $300,000 there, and a couple other things like the price of lumber changed. But where we really saw the most cost savings was from changes we were able to make because we took the surface parking approach and got a simpler building out of it. And so that's what you see there on the screen, from pouring less concrete to having fewer stops on the elevator to fewer doors, keeping our openings budget down. We were able to save almost $3 million. We did have to spend more in exterior improvements to build the surface parking, but one surface parking space is cheaper than a structured parking space. So it ended up, sort of balancing out. So like I said, almost 3 million in cost savings that are attributable to just those design changes to go from structured parking to surface parking and get that more rectangular building. Those numbers, that you saw are direct costs, materials and labor to actually build the building, but they also have an impact on indirect costs, contingency, insurance, overhead and fee for the general contractor. So when you look at the overall construction contract, it's actually $4 million worth of savings, or $75,000 a unit. So we went from nearly 21 million for a structured parking building down to a little less than 17 million. And then, as you might imagine, construction cost savings actually also impact the overall development budget. Owner contingency, the design, architecture and engineering are a percentage of construction costs. And then obviously construction costs impact both our tax credit basis, but also our carrying costs, our financial costs. So if we have a larger construction loan, we're paying more construction interest. So all those things enabled us to go from about $31 million in a total development budget for structured parking down to 25.8 for a surface park building. And we had an unfunded gap with the structured parking of almost 2.8 million. And we were able to close that gap with the surface parking scenario. So for those reasons, we wanted to request these amendments to the development agreement, because we do think that this is a more financially viable project. We don't lose units. And so we wanted to present it to you and answer your questions and go from there.
Appreciate it. Questions? Thoughts?
$54 units, right?
Yes.
So you're kind of where we thought, 478,000 a unit. Is that the original budget, or are we now below the original budget? Because isn't our deal kind of, we get money back off of our generosity if the project is better than we thought?
Yeah, and I mean, all of that is still built into the pro forma. This is a matter of how can we close the gap up front, knowing that we need to pay debt service on any permanent debt, the town's loan moving forward. So
I know that you had your budget. Tried modular, didn't work. Tried structured parking, didn't work. Now we're here.
Mhm.
Are we back at original budget, or are we below original budget, or above original budget?
yeah, I think with surface parking, we're closer to our original budget than we were with structured, than we started to get with modular. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
Hemisphere.
yeah, I think we're close to where we were.
Can I just ask what happened with the modular? Like what simply cost, or was there other?
Yeah, a couple things. So cost was one of them. The modules are cheaper than building a unit on site, but when you factor in transportation costs and the costs to set the modules and the costs for the GC to tie them all together, to do the foundation, to do the roof, we had been hearing it was kind of close, you know, maybe a little cheaper, maybe a little more expensive if you make a lot of mistakes up front in the planning, which we heard from some groups that they had done that and had learned from those mistakes. But the other issue was the timing. It takes many, many months to get the designs where they need to be for the manufacturer to turn them out and actually get them set. So we thought that stick built would be, if we're in relatively the same ballpark price wise, something that we should pursue for our funding applications so that we would be more shovel ready versus needing 9-10 months of design.
It's just with other projects going on locally, you know, physically you see them go up really fast and you're like, whoa, that's amazing. But there's all these things behind the scenes that, yeah. So I was just curious what this particular experience was. Thanks.
Yeah, and we talked with Symmetry, who's building over in Breckenridge, and we talked with Saunders, building in Winter Park, and it was really great to hear their experiences because we could unpack exactly how long it does take and exactly how different these two approaches are cost-wise, because a modular factory is thinking about their piece, the GCs are thinking about their piece, but you have to talk to everybody to put them together.
I would say long-term, looking
Well, and I just came across, so there's an OEdit program.
Mhm.
Did you guys look at that one?
Will fund manufacturers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think if, you know, if we have a long runway of
Mhm.
planning,
Right.
a viable option.
Another lot we can work on.
Right. Right.
You know, I think Rick and I talked a little bit about this, and like I was really intrigued in like the potential of that carve out for what we could do as kind of a community space associated to community housing there. And I think it's still a little bit of a potential loss if we go this route to not have that, be it daycare or whatever else we've been able to do there. I think back to our earlier conversation, it's 54 more units, and thinking about kind of some of the preschool daycare needs and everything else, like whenever we talk to preschool here, their issue is like that they're not at capacity because they don't have the staff, because the staff has no place to live. So maybe I'm justifying trying to give up some of this that I don't feel 100% comfortable with, but maybe this does close that housing gap and gets more folks who can then be faculty at the preschool.
Can you speak, so we still have a workforce obligation, right, with the state? Don't we have to provide? Yeah, okay, so that's where I'm going. So that gets transferred. So we still have that obligation, and 101 West Main still has additional commercial obligations by code, right?
Yeah.
So we're not
100%.
giving everything up. There's just, we're giving it up on this site, and do the costs outweigh the, yeah, okay.
And
This is a no-brainer.
Diane did put me in touch with the workforce office, and I've been speaking with them about the West Main site, and they're very open to it. So
I think leaning towards the right thing to do. It gets us the right mix and the right density in the right spot.
At the right price.
Yes.
I was comparing what these units are gonna come in at versus what Granite Park is coming in at. You guys are better at this.
well, that's good.
This is why public-private partnerships are better than government building buildings. Just my 2 cents. You hadn't heard, I think, that way.
Add, you good?
The numbers all, right, we've been talking numbers all night, the numbers all make sense, there's a greater picture. So I'm good with the project, but I can't help asking, like. The cost savings is right around what our loan is. Is that a discussion?
I think, it was a coincidence. We really pushed on the GC. But, to the extent that you want to have that discussion, we could certainly have it. Neil's, in the ether. He could chime in here too.
They have already borrowed the money and bought the property on it.
Amount of the gap, and we serve the gap first, then the loan, right? So. Yeah.
No, everything's, we're gonna have. Felt compelled by that.
It's good for us to keep in mind.
Are we there? Is that where we're at?
We're there. Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 23-15.
Move to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Burley. Is there any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Held is absent. Kalenko. Yes. Incan.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Scripcheck, Adrian is absent. Aaron.
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
The motion passes in first reading. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
And just one last note on this, they have, NHP has turned in their LIHTC application. It's strong within the group that's approved to apply. Still impressed with communication between us and them and how things are proceeding.
Next up this evening is old business. This is agenda item number 6. This is second reading ordinance 23-19, ordinance amending chapter 124 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco concerning public health and safety by amending Article 2 thereof concerning a disposable bag fee, to amend the definitions of disposable bag and paper bag, and to amend provisions concerning fees for the use of permanent disposable bags. I'll open up the public hearing, turn it over to staff and Hillary joining us online. Good evening, Hillary.
Good evening. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all on Zoom. Here again this evening for the second reading of the update to our single-use bag fee and single-use plastic ban update, ordinance 23-19. So I am more than happy I just have the slides from last week. There were some really minor changes, and they were actually just the changes that we discussed last week at the first reading. So just those minor adjustments to the exemptions that do bring us into better alignment with the state's Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. But more than happy to run through those again, or if you'd like to ask any questions.
Hold off unless anyone council wants to see the slide deck again. Specific questions for Hillary? Open up for public comment. Anyone wish to make public comment on this agenda item may do so now. None online, none in chambers. I'll close public comment. Council. Do it.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 23-19 on second reading.
Been moved to approve by Councilmember Burley. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Aronson. Is there a discussion on the motion? Call the question.
Burley. Yes. Held is absent. Kalenko. Yes. Incan.
Yes.
Morton.
Yes.
Scripcheck, Adrian is absent. Aaron.
Yes.
Passes. Thank you very much.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
I had lunch at a local restaurant and they served, it was not a Frisco restaurant, and they served my lunch in a styrofoam clamshell. They included the plastic silverware and they put it in a plastic bag. And I brought it home where I used my regular silverware and I felt really good about what we just did.
Good.
So,
Yes. Good job.
And part of me wants to be seeing them publicly, but thank you for keeping it out. Next up this evening's agenda, item number 7. This is second reading of ordinance 23-18, ordinance amending chapter 124 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco concerning public health and safety by adding a new article for concerning prohibition of the sale or distribution of single-use plastics. Of the public hearing, back to Hillary.
Right, back to me. So we're back for the second reading of ordinance 2318 to reduce our single-use plastic in town. Same as the last one, I do have the slides from the last meeting, and I'm happy to run through those if that would be helpful for anyone. And if not, happy to answer any questions you might have.
We need to see the slide deck. Any questions? Open up for public comment. Anyone wish to make public comment on this particular agenda item may do so now. None in chambers, none online, close public comment. Awesome. Just, yeah. Been moved to approve by Councilmember Helenko, sorry, second by Councilmember Burley. Any discussion on the motion. Call the question, please. Yes.
Early, yes.
Yes. Thank you, Larry, for that. Appreciate it. I'm in the coming. Very happy that we got that done. Thank you all. Next up, this evening is agenda number 8. This is an executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I move to open an executive session pertinent to section 24-6-402 parentheses 4 parentheses F. CRS concerning personal matters to conduct a performance evaluation of the town attorney.
Move to enter into executive session by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second? Any discussion on the motion?
Ominously red, I thought.
Can you call it for question?
Just me.
Can you call the question, please? Sorry. Yes.
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 Incan.
Yes.
Blanco. Yes. Halbus absent, script check, Adrian is absent.
Take a minute and then enter into executive session.